On the Hollywood Walk of Fame, workers lay down the name of a new star, actress Elizabeth Sparkle. On the day of the unveiling, paparazzi snap photos of the star, and in the following days, people from all over the world come to see it, take pictures, and even try not to step on it. But as time passes, people lose interest. The star cracks, people walk over it, it gets dirty, and at one point, a man even spills his food on it by accident. Cut to the present. Elizabeth is now the host of a TV fitness program. Her job is to lead the class in tight workout clothes, demonstrating the exercises. She ends the show by blowing a kiss to the audience and walks off the set. She strolls down a long hallway lined with portraits of herself while several crew members wish her a happy 50th birthday. She stops at the women's restroom, but the door is locked. So she decides to go into the men's, which is open. Not long after, Harvey, the TV network's director, walks in mid-phone call, unaware that Elizabeth is inside. Over the call, he tells an assistant to start looking for a younger, sexier replacement for Elizabeth, saying she's just too old now and no longer working for the show. He exits the bathroom without realizing she overheard every word. In the next scene, we see Harvey sitting with Elizabeth explaining that she's being let go. He insists it's not personal, it's just that the audience wants something new. And at 50, well, that's when it all stops. Elizabeth asks, "What stops?" Harvey fumbles, unsure how to answer. He pretends to hear someone calling for him and walks away. At this point, the film starts weaving in heavy symbolism, but the catalyst for everything is the bathroom. We've just seen everyone celebrate Elizabeth turning 50, and immediately after, the women's bathroom is locked. It's both literal and metaphorical, a symbol that at a certain age, opportunities for women begin to shrink or vanish entirely. So what did Harvey mean when he said, "At 50, it stops"? To me, it is beauty, youth, desirability, qualities that sadly are often equated with a woman's worth in our society. When he says it's what the audience wants, he's not just talking about the viewers of the show. He's speaking on behalf of society itself. It's as if Harvey sees Elizabeth as an expired product, something that no longer has value and must be replaced, because once she loses what made her valuable in their eyes, she's no longer wanted. What's ironic is that Harvey is actually a bit older than Elizabeth, yet the men's bathroom door remains wide open. This speaks volumes about how society treats aging in men versus women. While men's maturity is often seen as distinguished or desirable, for women, aging is viewed as a decline, something that makes them invisible. The danger is many women begin to internalize that idea, and we're about to see that happen. Elizabeth drives home. On the way, she gets distracted by a billboard with her face being peeled off. Moments later, a car crashes into hers. Fortunately, at the hospital, the doctor tells her she's okay and leaves. Elizabeth breaks down in tears, but just as she tries to stand, a nurse stops her. He's young, handsome, and has a large red mark on his hand. He quickly examines her, hands her his coat, and she leaves. But when she checks the coat, she finds a USB labeled "The Substance," along with a note that says, "Changed my life," and a phone number. Just then, an old friend from grade school greets her. It's Fred, someone who's always been in love with Elizabeth. He tells her she's still the most beautiful woman in the world and gives her his number, hoping they can catch up over drinks sometime. Elizabeth gets home, where a giant portrait of her younger self hangs on the wall. In the reflection of the glass, we see the current Elizabeth, much smaller, barely visible compared to the towering image. It's a clear symbol of how insignificant she feels in comparison to her younger self. A bouquet of roses sits nearby, a gift from the network thanking her for her years of service. The card reads, "You were amazing." That "were" stings. It implies she no longer is. Feeling conflicted, Elizabeth plugs in the USB. A commercial plays for a product called The Substance. It's a single injection that promises to create a better version of you, more youthful, more beautiful, more perfect. The catch? There are a few rules, but more on that later. Elizabeth doesn't seem too interested and tosses the USB in the trash. At this point, she's caught in an internal tug of war, unsure whether to try The Substance or not. That indecision is the result of everything she's been through. Being fired for her age and looks clearly shook her confidence, pushing her toward wanting that better version of herself. Fred's kind words lift her spirits briefly, but the flowers from the network with their past tense message bring her right back down. She's teetering on the edge, and two more emotional hits are about to push her over. That night, she goes to a bar hoping to meet someone or just have a good time. She's wearing a backless dress and sipping martinis, but she's alone the entire night. Beside her, a man flirts with a much younger woman. Elizabeth sees this and keeps drinking. That final blow drives her to dig the USB out of the trash when she gets home. She dials the number on the note to order The Substance. On the other end, a voice gives her a code and address and hangs up. The next morning, Elizabeth sees an ad in the newspaper, looking for the new Elizabeth. The only requirement? Be beautiful and between the ages of 18 and 30. she feels crushed again. But then something arrives to solve all her insecurities. Among her mail is an envelope marked "The Substance." Inside, there's an access card. She heads to the address she was given and finds a mysterious door. To enter, she has to crawl through it. Inside, there's a white room filled with lockers. In hers, Elizabeth finds a package containing a kit to use the substance. She looks at herself in the mirror, observes her body, and after a moment of hesitation, injects the activator fluid into her arm. Seconds later, she's overwhelmed by excruciating pain. Her body twists and collapses to the floor. Her back begins to convulse as if something inside her is taking shape. And then her skin splits open. From her back, a woman emerges. Her name is Sue. But before I tell you the outcome of that injection, it's important to highlight everything that led Elizabeth to this point. Those aversive experiences that crushed her self-esteem and drove her to seek a solution in the substance. Overhearing she was being fired for being too old, the patronizing note on the flowers, the loneliness at the bar, seeing a younger woman be desired, and the casting ad in the paper looking for her replacement. These were all external triggers, which suggests something crucial: self-esteem, or as the word implies, self-worth, is not really self at all. In reality, self-esteem is never truly internal. It's always shaped in relation to others. It stems from comparing how we see ourselves with what society deems valuable. This is one of the film's most important concepts, so keep it in mind. I'll return to it later. Back to Sue. The young, perfect version of Elizabeth, born from her back. She looks at herself in the mirror and realizes she's beautiful, youthful, with proportions that most of society would consider ideal. After taking a bath, Sue notices a nosebleed. Alarmed, she discovers that she needs to inject a stabilizing fluid, which can only be extracted from Elizabeth's back using a special syringe. Once she injects the fluid, she immediately recovers. To understand this, we have to understand how the substance works. In the commercial Elizabeth watched earlier, it's explained that the kit contains 4 components. First, the activator, which Elizabeth already used. It's single use only. Second, the syringe for drawing the stabilizing fluid, which can only be extracted from the matrix body. Sue must inject it daily to survive. Third, food, and finally the changer, a device that allows one version to sleep while the other wakes. But the instructions are crystal clear. These rotations must last exactly 7 days, or else very bad things can happen. The commercial ends by reminding us both of them are the same person. Sue, now living in the apartment with Elizabeth, sees the casting ad for the new Elizabeth. She buys a sexy outfit and heads to the studio to audition. The casting is a success. Harvey himself is blown away by her looks and hires her on the spot. Sue lies, saying she has a scheduling issue due to her mother's illness, which requires her to leave the city every other week. Harvey doesn't mind. The deal is sealed and Sue's new life as a superstar begins. To stay alive, she keeps injecting herself with the stabilizing fluid while attending photo shoots and rehearsals. The project is such a hit that the network installs a massive billboard of Sue wearing barely anything and looking stunning. That billboard faces the apartment directly, staring right at Elizabeth's old portrait, and since the apartment has huge windows, it's always visible from inside. After a long productive week, it's time for the switch. Sue prepares the changer and the process begins. Elizabeth awakens, slowly rising from the floor, and sees what came out of her, the younger, more perfect version that the substance had promised. She examines Sue's body and face in the bathroom mirror. Later, Elizabeth visits the studio where she used to work, only to find that all her portraits have been taken down. Harvey returns her belongings and hands her a cookbook as a parting gift. Back home, Elizabeth begins her new routine, eating, bathing, and spending her time watching infomercials from the couch. She's so disengaged from her own life that she even checks Sue's food supply. Not for her benefit, but to calculate how many more days she'll have to remain awake. The 7 days pass, and now it's Sue's turn again. Upon realizing how little Elizabeth has done with her time, Sue decides to build a secret room behind the bathroom to hide Elizabeth's body. A neighbor, annoyed by the noise, knocks on the door. Thinking Elizabeth is causing the commotion, he starts shouting until he sees Sue. Immediately, his tone shifts. He's flustered, apologetic, even offers to help. Sue politely declines. Once the hidden room is finished, Sue locks Elizabeth inside. She then removes a large portrait of Elizabeth, revealing only her own massive billboard in the window. The next day is Sue's first official taping of the fitness show. With a group of backup dancers, she performs energetic moves that emphasize and exaggerate her physical attributes, her figure, her beauty. At the end, she signs off using the exact same gestures and phrases that Elizabeth used to say. After the taping, Sue walks down the hallway where a new poster featuring her has already replaced Elizabeth's. Now it's Sue's final night before the switch. She notices that Elizabeth's food is running low but tells her not to worry. She won't be gone long. Then she heads out to party with some friends. The night ends back at the apartment where Sue is about to hook up with a biker guy, but just as they begin undressing, her nose starts to bleed again. She's out of stabilization nebulizer. Desperate, Sue runs to the bathroom, grabs the syringe, and extracts more fluid from Elizabeth's back, despite the strict rule forbidding this. After a night of passion, the switch happens again. Elizabeth wakes up and finds a note from Sue's guy saying he'll come back for his helmet, but then she freezes. Her face twists in horror. One of her fingers is grotesquely aged and deformed. She realizes what's happening. Sue stayed out too long. The extra hours were stolen from her. Elizabeth calls the number for the substance. They explain that what's taken from one side is lost from the other. There's no way to reverse it, and they remind her once again, there is no her and me. You are the same. The finger is only the beginning. As time passes and Sue keeps stealing more time, Elizabeth's body will continue to deteriorate until she becomes a grotesque, monstrous shell. And that's exactly what we're about to see. Immediately after, Elizabeth watches the show featuring Sue as the new star, with shots glorifying her body and showcasing her beauty, making Elizabeth feel awful. To me, the transformation in Elizabeth's finger holds two symbolic meanings. It's a finger with the characteristics of a very old person, but these traits are exaggerated and grotesque. I believe this is the film putting aging on the table, how our society sees it as something repulsive, but we'll come back to that. The second meaning is that through Elizabeth's physical deterioration, we can see how her self-perception worsens. The more she compares herself, the more she starts to hate herself. The film exaggerates these features, not because aging is grotesque in itself, but because Elizabeth sees it in herself as something worthy of hatred. After this scare, she walks to the warehouse to pick up a refill of the substance. This time she's fully covered, sunglasses, coat, gloves. It's a stark contrast to how she presented herself at the beginning of the film, wearing revealing clothes on set or the backless dress at the bar. This change also shows just how much her insecurity has grown. After picking up the package, Elizabeth goes to a cafe where something surprising happens. An elderly man with blue eyes sitting across from her says, "It feels eternal, doesn't it? 7 days." Elizabeth looks at him closely and notices the scar on his back, the same mark the nurse had. This reveals he was also a client of the substance. Elizabeth is horrified, but before she can flee, the old man says, "It gets harder and harder to remember you still deserve to exist, that this part of you still has worth, that you still matter." Terrified, Elizabeth runs back to her apartment but accidentally bumps into the same motorcycle guy Sue had slept with. He reacts with pure contempt before storming off. This scene with the elderly man is powerful. He's not a woman whose value is traditionally tied to beauty, yet even he says that sometimes it's hard to remember he deserves to exist. In our productivity-obsessed society, the older we get, the more irrelevant we become at work, in culture, and beyond. Once a person is seen as unproductive, they start losing their perceived value and purpose. Modern society seems to deny older people the right to be visible, heard, or taken seriously. Instead, they're often seen as a burden. These days, aging is treated like a disease to be cured or fought. It's no coincidence that so many people try to look younger than they really are. In Elizabeth's case, because her job was directly tied to her looks and age, this situation is even more devastating. Later, Elizabeth finds Fred's number among her things and remembers how he once told her she was still the most beautiful woman in the world. She decides to call him, and they agree to meet at a bar that night. Elizabeth seems genuinely happy during the call, and Fred sounds excited too. That night, Elizabeth puts on heels and a red dress, clothes she hasn't worn in a long time. In the bathroom, she carefully applies makeup, but just as she's about to leave, she sees Sue's body lying on the floor. She notices her smooth skin and full lips, which prompts her to go back to the mirror and apply even more makeup and lipstick. When she's finally ready, she grabs her car keys, but before heading out, she sees the massive billboard of Sue through the window, highlighting her perfect figure, which makes Elizabeth go back to the bathroom to cover her chest. She's running late, but as she touches the doorknob, she catches a distorted reflection of herself in the metal, warped by its curvature. In that warped reflection, she sees something monstrous. So she returns to the bathroom, starts removing her makeup, scrubbing her face, and violently messing up her hair. The night ends with Elizabeth locked in her room, unable to leave the house, while Fred sits alone at the restaurant waiting for a date that never showed up. All of this caused by the constant comparisons that, like that warped reflection, have completely twisted the way Elizabeth sees herself. We've already discussed how self-esteem is born from comparing who we are to what society deems valuable, and this scene perfectly portrays the everyday experience of the average woman, where constant comparisons create constant insecurities. We live in a society where we're bombarded with images representing what's considered desirable. Girls on billboards, supermodels on runways, endless videos of beautiful people on social media. These faces and bodies are the ones receiving admiration, likes, attention, and love. That's already harmful, but what makes it even worse is that these standards are completely unattainable. They're heavily edited. It's an unfair competition because you're not even competing against something real. Even the supermodels in those photos don't look like that in real life. And you don't have to look far. How many filters on TikTok or Instagram can smooth your skin, enlarge your eyes, or slim down your body? This ties directly into the beauty industry. In the film, Elizabeth's insecurities were intentionally amplified, and the substance was sold to her as the fix. In real life, those solutions are beauty products and surgeries promising to get you closer to that ideal, but they will always disappoint you because that ideal isn't real. It doesn't exist. And if we're being a little conspiratorial, think about it. There's no reason why these industries would ever solve our insecurities. If they did, they'd stop making money. But if feeling less than is something constant, they'll always have something new to sell. When a beauty ad shows you a retouched model next to a product, what it's really saying is, buy this, and you might get a little closer to that impossible ideal. What's even sadder is that this cycle feeds itself. As a society, we've internalized these impossible standards as the way we should be. And that's dangerous because it doesn't address the real problem. Instead, we just get band-aids for a much deeper wound. That's why phrases like love yourself as you are or just accept yourself can feel cruel because it's not a choice. When you're bombarded with these ideals every single day and then you look in the mirror, of course you feel bad. No matter how hard you try, you'll never look like that because nobody looks like that in real life. This theme of comparison runs through the entire film. We see it in the billboard of Sue facing Elizabeth's apartment, the way Sue mimics Elizabeth's farewell gestures on camera, Sue's body always visible in the bathroom, and the way others treat them differently. Harvey, the neighbor, the biker. Every one of these scenes reinforces the idea that constant comparison is what defines and destroys Elizabeth's self-esteem. The day to switch over arrives and Sue wakes up. When Sue sees that Elizabeth has spent her 7 days eating, watching TV, and letting the house fall into disarray, she becomes furious. She calls the substance to complain, but the response is the same. There is no her and me. You are one and the same. Despite everything, Sue's life seems to keep getting better. Harvey calls her into his office to tell her the audience loves her and the show is breaking ratings records. He offers her the role of host for the New Year's Eve special, a broadcast watched by tens of millions. Thrilled, Sue accepts, though Harvey warns her it'll require a lot of rehearsing. To pull it off, she needs to stay awake for over 7 days, so she begins to exceed the allowed time, continuously extracting stabilizing fluid from Elizabeth's body. As a result, when they switch back and Elizabeth wakes up, her body is horrifically aged and grotesquely deteriorated. Her hair is gray, her skin saggy and dry, one leg covered in varicose veins, her fingernails yellowed, sunspots cover her skin, and swollen lumps have formed from fluid buildup. Enraged, Elizabeth calls the substance. They tell her she can end the experiment if she wants, but as she looks at Sue's billboard and remembers that they're one and the same, she decides not to. That night, as Elizabeth cooks with the book Harvey gave her, she sees Sue on TV in an interview mocking her age with snide comments like Jurassic Fitness. Fuming, Elizabeth lashes out by violently cooking and wrecking the apartment. When it's time to switch again and Sue wakes up, she screams at the sight of the chaos Elizabeth has left behind. Furious, she refuses to change back. She gathers several vials and extracts as much stabilizing fluid as she can from Elizabeth's back, doing it with hatred, calling her disgusting, old, and fat. 3 months go by. Sue continues her life, refusing to switch. But with just 1 day left before the long-awaited New Year's show, she runs out of stabilizer. When she tries to draw more from Elizabeth, she finds there's nothing left. The nosebleeds and pain worsen. She desperately needs it. Frantic, she calls the substance, but they inform her she's used it all. The only way to generate more is to switch bodies with the Matrix. Weak and barely conscious, Sue drags herself to the bathroom and performs the transfer. Elizabeth wakes up screaming. Her body, now after 3 months without a switch, is that of a skeletal, hunched-over, hairless, twisted old woman. Symbolically, it represents how broken her self-perception has become. She now sees herself as a monster. Elizabeth calls the substance to cancel the program. She covers herself and heads out to collect the final kit. Back at the apartment, she drags Sue's body into the living room. She takes the syringe meant to inject Sue's heart and end the cycle. But just as she's about to do it, her gaze lingers on the bouquet of flowers sent to Sue with a note, "They're going to love you." She looks at the billboard, at Sue's face, her own face. Something makes her hesitate. She pulls the syringe away and tries to revive Sue. "I need you," she sobs. "I need you because I hate myself." Her voice trembles. You're the only part of me that deserves to be loved. The part of her that deserves love, she means her youth, the version of herself that was young, represented all along by Sue. Remember, Elizabeth's entire identity has been built around that. She has no children, no partner, few friends. Her younger self was the one who received all the love, applause, and attention. That's why she can't kill Sue. She can't let go of that part of her. So she grabs the changer and stabs the needle straight into her heart. It works. Sue comes back to life. But something unexpected happens. For the first time, both of them are awake at the same time. For a moment, they lock eyes, stunned, but then Sue realizes Elizabeth tried to kill her. She attacks her, beating her savagely. Elizabeth fights back, but Sue overpowers her. Just before delivering the final blow, they catch a glimpse of themselves in the mirror, both of them reflected side by side. The image seems to stop Sue, if only for a second. Then she resumes the beating and smashes Elizabeth's face. While she kicks her on the floor, flashes hit her mind. Echoes of the substance's mantra. Remember, the two are one. It makes her stop, but it's too late. Elizabeth is dead. I believe this fight symbolizes the constant inner war people have with the idea of aging. Let me explain. Throughout the film, there have been countless shots glorifying Sue's sensuality and youth, a kind of worship of the young. And those shots aren't there by accident. Today, youth is valued more than ever. We celebrate being young and dismiss the old, but this obsession hides a cruel paradox. The more we worship youth, the less right we have to claim it. Living your life pushing the elderly aside, fearing age, and demeaning the place of older people is like shooting yourself in the foot, because every single one of us, sooner or later, will end up there. Furthermore, this fight is a declaration that the part of Elizabeth that only perceived herself as valuable when she was young has won. Tragically, she couldn't find anything worth loving in this new phase of her life, so she chose to disappear. Sue washes off the blood and heads to the set for the big show that night. Harvey greets her, complimenting how stunning she looks in her blue dress, but Sue begins to feel sick. She heads to the bathroom and, looking in the mirror, is horrified to see her teeth falling out. She knows she has to act fast. She rushes home to inject the activator, even though it can only be used once. Before she can leave, Harvey stops her, now accompanied by a group of men. He introduces her to the investors who stare at her like a product. Sue manages to hide her condition long enough to escape. Back at the apartment, she injects the activator and looks at herself in the mirror, pleading with the substance, "Please, give me a better version of myself." The activator kicks in, and she experiences the same painful transformation Elizabeth once felt. But the result is something entirely different. Instead of becoming a beautiful new version, she turns into a horrifying creature. It has teeth, hair, and eyes all over its body, barely human, and on its back, Elizabeth's face is fused into its flesh. This being is the Elisa Sue monster. Still, the monster puts on the blue dress, a pair of earrings, and cuts out one of Elizabeth's photos to use the face as a mask, covering her deformed features. Elisa Sue heads toward the set, where the New Year's show is already being broadcast live. I want us to pay attention to how this show has audience members of all ages, including little girls, yet among them are women who are either naked or wearing extremely provocative clothing. The fact that there are little girls watching this could be a way of showing how women are exposed from a very young age to sexualization and to the pressure of chasing an impossible beauty ideal. The monster Elisa Sue walks from the back of the stage to the front. At first, the audience senses that something's off, but once the paper mask falls off, the horror is revealed. The first to scream is a woman who points at Elisa Sue and yells, "It's a monster!" The rest of the audience starts screaming in terror and shouting for someone to shoot her. Elisa Sue tries to calm them down, saying, "It's still me. I'm Elizabeth. I'm Sue." But no one is willing to listen. Instead, people begin beating her as she pleads for mercy, crying out, "It's me! I'm still the same!" With these words, it seems to me that Elizabeth has reached a moment of self-acceptance and integration. Before, she clung only to Sue, to her younger self, her past, the version of her she believed worthy of love. But through her words, we understand that she has come to accept that Elizabeth is Sue, but she is also her present self, the 50-year-old Elizabeth. Her understanding of herself has changed. She now realizes that her worth isn't only defined by who she was, but also by the many new possibilities of who she can become and by everything she still has to offer. When she says, "I'm still me," she also means that even though your body changes, you are still the same person underneath, deserving of love and affection. Everything ends when a man strikes her head with a heavy object, causing Elisa Sue to shower blood over the entire audience, almost as if in that final moment she returns all the violence she endured throughout her life. As she dies, her mind mind is overwhelmed by all the hurtful phrases she's heard over the years. What remains of Elizasu manages to crawl outside, but now all that's left is the original face of Elizabeth. It drags itself slowly across the pavement, leaving a trail of blood and decay until it reaches her star on the Walk of Fame. There, in a final moment of agony, Elizabeth's face stops on top of the star and begins to disintegrate slowly, vanishing completely. This story is fiction, but the actress who plays Elizabeth, Demi Moore, is living proof of everything we've just analyzed. Today, in 2025, she's 62 years old, and she's likely experienced something very similar to what Elizabeth went through, a youth in which she was praised for her beauty and played young, desirable characters. But as younger actresses emerged and she began to age, she no longer fit the beauty standard. Her popularity declined, and she started to be forgotten. Perhaps like Elizabeth, she went through a crisis in which she questioned whether she still had anything left to offer, beyond a beauty that would never return. But in a poetic twist, at 62, she gave the world one of the greatest performances of her entire career. It's not worth clinging to what once was. Every stage of life deserves to be lived in the present. Yes, the past is part of who we are, but it's not the only part. Every stage in life gives us a new set of possibilities. Maybe she won't play young girls anymore, but she can portray many other roles, perhaps even more fulfilling ones. But those new possibilities will only come if we let go of the past and stay open to what lies ahead. And to close this video, I want to remind you that while self-esteem often depends on how we compare ourselves to others, that doesn't mean we're powerless to change it. Maybe questioning those ideals can help us find some peace. To ask ourselves, is this comparison really fair? Do I really need to be like that to be worthy of love? Do I really need to look like that to be valuable? These questions might help us realize that these standards are unfounded. We don't need to meet these ideals to be people worthy of love and care, because a person is much more than their face, much more than their physical appearance, and much more than their productivity. So just in case you've forgotten, or if someone made you forget, let me remind you, you are worth so much more than any image. Beauty is actually something unique, something diverse, something that is yours, not something that needs to be imposed. Celebrate your accomplishments, your voice, your ideas, and above all, be kind to yourself. Because resistance begins with looking at yourself with compassion, even when the world doesn't.